we welcome you all to this webinar today focusing on Casablanca and Casablanca Financial Center. We are delighted to welcome colleagues Saeed Ibrahimi and Manal Banoussi to this event, and very much looking forward to exploring what's going on in Casablanca and indeed through to Africa. Just a brief word of thanks to our sponsors who enable us to do these events. We are very, very grateful to all of them. And for those of you who want to know more about what we do and how we do it, please get in touch with us and we'll be pleased to help. So today we have three distinguished panelists: Mr. Saeed Ibrahimi, the CEO of Casablanca Finance City, Manal Banoussi, Director of Strategy, Partnerships and Communications, and Professor Michael Manelli, the Executive Chairman of the ZN Group. Towards the end of the session, which is about 45 minutes, we will have time for questions. And we'd really welcome you putting questions to us. We'll get through as many as we can. For those of you who want to know how to put a question, this is also an important thing that you'll need to know in just a few minutes when Manal is speaking. There is a question box to the right-hand side of your screens in the dashboard where you can type in your questions and comments, and we will see those and we'll try to answer as many as we can throughout. But make sure you know where that question box is, because you're going to need it in a minute to answer a little quiz. Without any further ado then, I just want to hand over to ask Mr. Saeed Ibrahimi to introduce the session, and Mr. Ibrahimi, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us in today's session. I hope that all of you are well and staying safe. We are glad to see that Casablanca is generating an increased interest from our international audience. We look forward to sharing with you today a deeper insight on Casablanca Finance City and how we contribute to shedding the light on Africa and doing business on the continent. I would also like to start by thanking Professor Manelli and Mike Waddle, as well as all the ZN team, for offering us this platform and facilitating this webinar. Casablanca Finance City is a public-private initiative launched in 2010 by the Moroccan authorities. Our main objective is to channel investments towards the continent and help companies conduct their business in Africa. We have joined the GFCI ranking in 2014, and since 2016, we have been ranked as the first financial center in Africa. CFC was created to act as a financial and economic hub by channeling global savings towards investment opportunities on the continent. Africa is a land full of opportunities and potential, but it is still fragmented. Hence, the need for a gateway where economic and financial companies can benefit from a well-connected stronghold on the continent with easy access to markets, a proper doing business environment, and access to local talent pool. We are proud that our business community now includes more than 200 members operating in 48 countries on the continent. CFC has established many partnerships worldwide and within the continent and is strongly committed to promoting green and sustainable growth in Africa. In these exceptional times, we are committed to maintaining Casablanca's strong position, and we appreciate your contribution in completing the GFCI survey. Thank you again, Professor Mike, for your invitation. A warm welcome to everyone who's with us today. I now pass the word to Manal Banoussi for the presentation.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are really excited to be sharing with you insights on this great journey that we have been building for a decade now. Let me start by thanking ZN, Professor Mike, and the whole ZN team for this invitation. Saeed and I were very excited to be sharing with you these insights. So actually 2020 marks the 10th anniversary of Casablanca Finance City. So let me start right away by touching on Africa's potential. Can you help me, Mike, by spinning the slides? Bear with me, there's a little delay on the slides. So Africa's potential as a growth market for business remains both underestimated and misunderstood. So let's consider just one question, and Mike was mentioning it right away. And I would really love to read your guesses in the question box. In your opinion, how many companies in Africa earn annual revenues of $1 billion or more? Go ahead, please type in your best guess. I would love to see some numbers coming in. Okay. I can see some numbers. 550, says Bob. Okay, fair enough. 100. Well, that's it. The most global executives and academics guess there are fewer than 100. Many even answer 0. The reality? More than 400 such companies exist. And they are, on average, both faster growing and more profitable than their global peers. And this is according to Brookings. It's a US-based nonprofit that conducts in-depth research and serious studies. Looking further ahead to 2030, at least 24 of the continent's countries are expected to see their economies grow at least 5%, which will help fuel a jump in Africa's collective GDP to some 29 trillion by 2050. 2 indicators underline the continent's promise. First, of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world in 2019, 6 were in Africa, with Ghana at the top of the world ranking. Secondly, in the World Bank's 2019 Doing Business Index, 5 of the 10 most improved countries are in Africa also. So in an environment of slowing global growth, Africa presents important opportunities for business. Let me just highlight quickly at least 4 of those, not to go into too much detail. So first opportunity, a population that is fast growing and urbanizing. Africa is home to almost 17% of the global population, likely rising to 26% by 2050, according to the current UN projections. Second, Africa is industrializing. An industrial revolution is underway as manufacturers ramp up production of everything from processed food to cars, and there is really an important opportunity to grow manufacturing exports as industries shift away from China and are looking to other lower cost regions. Opportunity 3, Africa is pushing to close its infrastructure gap. Africa's annual investment in infrastructure has doubled to around 80 billion a year since the beginning of this century. And this really represents a big opportunity for investors and entrepreneurs with the imagination to help solve Africa's infrastructure challenges. And finally, I cannot not mention the potential of increasing digital and mobile access. Africa has more than 120 million active mobile money accounts. This is over 50% of the global total. This has leapfrogged many people over traditional banking products, and this trend will continue and could add $300 billion to the continent's GDP by 2050. So great opportunities there, but why aren't more foreign companies hurrying to tap into the continent's potential? If you can help me go to the second slide, Mike, I think there is some delay. So the reality is that Africa is highly fragmented with many small economies and markets. Africa's 54 countries are diverse in terms of population, development levels, growth rates, and stability. While, for instance, Nigeria has nearly 190 million people, and Ethiopia and Egypt have over 90 million people each, well, most African nations have populations below 20 million. So really, each of these countries had its own sets of rules, legal frameworks, and there is little reliable, easily accessible information about investing there. So Casablanca Finance City, with its mandate to create a stable and secure point of entry into Africa, was set up to tackle this very problem. Moving on to the next slide, thanks to its strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Africa, Morocco is perfectly placed for this. We are located 14 kilometers away from Europe, 7 hours away from the US, conveniently on the GMT time zone. But good geography is not enough. Morocco's political stability, thanks to a monarchy dating back over 12 centuries, world-class infrastructure, including airports with hundreds of direct flights within and beyond the continent. For your information, there are 16 international airports in Morocco. Morocco also launched the first high-speed train in Africa and the largest port in Africa. All these aspects, combined with a skilled workforce, solid economic fundamentals, and really strong diplomatic and economic strategy, which is open to the world, but also deeply rooted in the continent, all these have contributed to set Morocco as the ideal investment platform for Africa. Moving on to the next slide, for companies facing slowing and uncertain growth prospects at home, or those that are simply looking for new overseas markets, CFC is building on Morocco's strategic assets to help unlock the potential not just of Morocco, but also Africa. By the way, you can see here a glimpse of our, the previous slide, a glimpse of our brand new CFC Tower, which is a 25-story building located at the CFC district. So let's talk about the CFC's value proposition. Next slide. Moving on to our value proposition, CFC's offers international members three important aspects: a streamlined doing business environment, a connected base and support network, thanks to a close and tight-knit business community, and also trusted insights to capture Africa's promise and growth. Let me quickly diving into each one of these three aspects. First, the doing business component. So this is a one-stop shop that CFC offers its members for facilitations and simplified procedures. They can, for instance, apply for and pick up foreign employment contracts directly at CFC headquarters in 48 hours and residence permits in 2 weeks. CFC also offers capital mobility and gives companies total freedom to manage foreign currency holdings. It's also worth to mention that CFC has spurred the creation of the Casablanca International Mediation and Arbitration Center for companies that are operating in the region. And this is an independent organization with world-renowned international referees operating in 4 languages: English, Arabic, Spanish, and French. The second aspect is the access to the CFC community. Over the past decade, Casablanca Finance City has built a community of some 200 companies, including financial institutions, regional headquarters for multinationals, service providers such as consulting firms, and holding companies. And what's really unique about our positioning is that in order to apply for the CFC status, these companies all need to conduct business in Africa. Not only Morocco, but provide a clear business plan with operations in Africa. So I feel this is really an important differentiation point. Here in the next slide, you can see some of the great signatures we have in Casablanca Finance City. Bear with me for the delay. There you go. So, for instance, insurance giant AIG is present. AIG, they have a long history in Africa, and it was the first foreign insurance institution to establish a servicing office in CFC in 2014. In 2015, Ford expanded its presence in North Africa by establishing a new regional sales and marketing office in Casablanca. And since 2019, this regional office extended its role to manage the group's operations in Western Africa as well. And today, they drive operations in 47 markets in Africa from their CFC office. Big consulting companies, as you can see in the slides, such as the Boston Consulting Group, PwC, or Clifford Chance, are also very active members of the CFC community. This next slide shows the African fruit footprint of our community, which, as you can see, covers a large part of the continent, 48 countries. These companies all operate from Casablanca while conducting business in all these countries. And really, CFC's added value lies in the fact that it helps these investors, when deep diving into Africa, find the hub at the appropriate mid-level as a kind of decompression stop, really, that makes them get closer to their local context without being too far from international standards. And the third component of our value proposition is our Africa Insight segment. Through this segment, we identify the need for information from our members and share insights that benefit the CFC community and help them better understand and comprehend the diversity of Africa. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, there is little reliable, easily accessible information about investing in Africa, and so we are here to help filling that gap. So, also, it's worth mentioning that there is a specific tax regime for CFC companies. This regime is in line with the OCDE regulation and best practices. There are mainly three aspects to keep in mind. So, for corporate income tax, there is total exemption during the first 5 years, starting from the first fiscal year of granting the CFC status. After that, it's a specific rate of 15% beyond. Regarding personal income tax, all CFC employees have the choice between 20% flat rate on personal income during the first 10 years of arrival, or the standard taxation, which is progressive from 10% to 38%. Other tax incentives include exemption from withholding tax on dividends distributed to residents and non-residents. So this is to give you an overview of the tax regime. Here, this slide, as you can see, shows a map of our international partnerships. At CFC, we really believe that international cooperation is key. And it allows us to exchange best practices, fosters collaboration on global issues such as green and sustainable finance or fintechs. So far we have signed 13 partnerships with international financial centers. As you can see, ranging from Singapore, which actually was the first MOU we signed, to Toronto, Frankfurt, London, Shanghai, and so on. 2 years ago, we also joined the World Alliance of International Financial Centers as a founding member, and first African financial center to join that alliance. We obviously also care about developing very strong partnerships in Africa. We have 19 cooperation agreements signed so far. These are really key to help CFC companies on the ground if they need local assistance. So, Mike, just before wrapping up the presentation, I want to say a word about green and sustainable finance. At CFC, we have a strong focus on this segment. We really believe in the need of growth, development, infrastructure, obviously, for the continent, but in a sustainable manner, environmentally friendly manner, now more than ever, as we are all slowly and progressively overcoming the COVID crisis. So our positioning really relies on these three pillars you can see here. First, building a green finance ecosystem. So we're looking to have a green finance value proposition and really attract major players from the green and sustainable finance industry. Funds, consulting firms, rating agencies. These are all companies that we would like to have in our CFC community. And the objective really is to massify green investment flows and attract those to Africa. And second, which is really important, is, as I mentioned, the international partnerships. This leads me to my next slide. I would like just to highlight two examples of our commitment to this topic. Actually, in December 2017, the FC4S, which is an important UN-backed network, has been launched at the CFC's headquarters, and to date brings together over 30 international financial centers and provides them with tools to push the green agenda forward. Casablanca Finance City leads today the African chapter of this initiative, which is really also a mark of our engagement and commitment to this topic. The second example I wanted to highlight, not to go into the details of everything you have in the slide, but in June 2019, we organized an important capacity building event because we want to contribute to raising the awareness on this important topic. So the International Seminar on Greening Africa's Financial System, this was a 3-day event that has convened over 150 participants from 24 international countries and 12 African countries. So it was a mix of workshops and field trips, and it was really a great experience in enhancing and explaining the benefits of green finance for the African development. So to wrap up, as I believe it's already been 15 minutes, I want to leave you with these key figures to keep in mind. I think I will stop here now, and we will be happy to answer questions later on. Back to you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that was really, really great, Manal. Absolutely excellent presentation there. And I was just going to pick up with a few comments from an external viewpoint, if that was all right. I've got 4 slides here, and they actually underscore very heavily what the message that Saeed and Manal wish to get across. First is Casablanca. Casablanca first enters the Global Financial Centers Index in 2013. As you can see, that's the red line in this slide that begins kind of coming out of the yellow one. So Casablanca then joins Mauritius and also Johannesburg, and the green line to the far right is Cape Town coming in as well. So it's been a steadily rising center, and as you can see, it has also overtaken the old hands of Johannesburg and Mauritius over that period of time. And there are a number of good reasons for that, which I will come to in a minute. But there has been broadly a very consistent improvement in ratings, and it's that Casablanca is well connected with major centers, including Dubai, London, and New York. In fact, my first visit to Casablanca was in the very early 60s, and I recall having to take a ship there, and times have completely changed to the point that, in fact, the old airfield has become the new financial center. Next slide, Mike. And one of the things that I think is intriguing about this, as you look at it, is it's also got a lot of scale in depth, particularly at the point that Vincent made just a moment ago about the importance of green finance. So this slide shows you that Casablanca scores better on what is called depth, i.e., Is it sort of walking the talk? How integrated is green finance within it? And outside of Europe, this is a particularly good showing. And then on quality, which is the quality of advice that people feel that they're getting when they go to Casablanca for green finance, it also outstrips the other three competing African centers. Next slide, Mike. And I think that a lot of this is due to the politics of Africa. As Mansell mentioned, there are 54 countries there. The vast majority of them have less than 20 million people. And in some ways, if you wish to have a single point of entry in a stable area, in a place where you're seen to be treated fairly, then you're going to pick something outside, one would argue, of the major areas, either by population, Egypt or Ethiopia, or Nigeria, or economically in the case of South Africa, which equally has problems. So some of these difficulties have left an open door for an efficient networking center for the totality of Africa. While it might seem a little strange to locate an African international center for that type of trade north of the Sahel, in fact, it does make a tremendous amount of sense. And for those of you who question these sorts of things, one could equally argue that why would the European financial center be stuck on an island hanging off the west coast of Europe? So there's all sorts of good reasons why Casablanca showing is not just a temporary phenomenon. So it is rapidly becoming more of a leading financial center in Africa than some of the other competing centers. And this leadership is being done in a collaborative way. Certainly we at Zien, who run the Global Financial Centers Index and the Financial Center Futures, we treasure Casablanca as a place that is extremely cooperative. We've already mentioned green finance, but that's not, as I said, a shallow commitment. It's also a real commitment at home to have high energy performance on sustainability and CO2 emissions, as well as just being a financial center focused on it. Obviously, in the case of Africa, as people, old hands will know, one of the biggest things has always been political risk, and also, of course, a stable economy. And in both cases, Morocco has been performing well internationally. And finally, when you look at people's attitudes towards outsourcing, which is related strongly to their views of political risk and economic performance, the outsourcing is a good indicator that people feel comfortable in Morocco processing things, and that is a very good harbinger of where they might go in the future. So my final slide is looking to the future of Casablanca. We genuinely feel that out of the 108 centers that we're looking at, and whilst Mauritius for a while was leading in the idea of being gateway to Africa, Morocco and Casablanca are establishing that position much more strongly by building this collaborative environment that you need. I might also emphasize the trading aspects. It is a major port and a major potential entry to the country as well. And I believe the Zien team believe that trade finance could be an equally growing area to lie alongside the various other financial trading aspects that are there. I'm also pleased when you look at standard, if there is such a thing, ways to compete as a financial center. Casablanca has recognized most of them. So green, a commitment to fintech, commitment to international collaboration, but also recognizing that mediation and arbitration are equally important, a point I alluded to earlier when I said treating all comers fairly. So with this continued emphasis on green finance and green investment, and also the growing market for ethical finance, including Islamic finance and fintech, in sum, we would say that Casablanca is extremely well positioned to meet the task and goal that it set itself to be the gateway to Africa for financial services. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for that external view. And we now move into a question period. And I suggest we take the first question on how Casablanca features as an Islamic finance center. Just picking up on Michael's point just now, and would either Manal or Saeed like to comment on finance aspects?
Yes, sure. Happy to. Thank you for the question, and thank you all for submitting all your questions that we're seeing. We're really glad to see all this interest on Casablanca Finance City. For this Islamic finance question, I would like to hand over to my colleague Murad, who is our expert on the topic. So let me introduce you, Murad, right here.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. So regarding your specific question on Islamic finance, so indeed, Islamic finance is a very promising field when it comes to Africa. There are huge upsides and potential is clear there, because think about the market size. The potential market size in Africa is that you have a population of 400 million Muslims, and that are established in countries where the banking penetration rates remain relatively low. If you think about some countries, the banking penetration rates and financial inclusion in general are reaching very low levels of around 10 to 15% when it comes to banking penetration. On the other hand, you have, as mentioned previously by Manal in the presentation, huge needs when it comes to infrastructure development, building roads, schools, real estate projects, and so on. All these projects are physically based, asset-based, Sharia-compliant investment projects. And obviously, there is a potential here to bridge the gap between the needs on the continent and the liquidity pools that you might find when it comes to Islamic and Sharia-compliant finance in the GCC countries or in the ASEAN countries. Think about Indonesia, but Malaysia, and so on. So yeah, clearly the potential is there, and as the financial center and in Africa, CFC is doing its best to bridge the two worlds. Over to you, Manal.
Thank you very much, Murad. Shall we take any more questions, Mike? Hope this answers
yes,
the
that's
question.
Lovely. Thank you. There's a question from Bob McDowell, who asked whether you would distinguish for business segmentation and growth purposes for Africa north of the Sahara and Africa south of the Sahara, or do you see this as very much a single market that doesn't need segmentation?
I would love,
this
great.
question. Do you hear me?
Yes,
okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, sorry for not having been able to deliver my welcome speech. That shows that, by the way, there's no need of welcome speeches. The presentation went well, so it's okay. Coming back to your question, North Africa versus Sub-Saharan Africa. This is the question. In general, people tend to talk about North Africa with Middle East. So it's MENA region opposed to South Sub-Saharan Africa. We don't like at all this way of thinking of Africa. Of course, North Africa is a coherent region, but Sub-Saharan Africa is not a single country. It's not, you don't have similarities within all these countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. You can talk about North Africa, of course, but you can talk as well of Western Africa. You can talk of Southern Africa, and you can talk about Eastern Africa. We have shown during the presentation that the continent is quite wide. You have north-south roughly 8,000 kilometers, and east-west 7,800 kilometers. So it's a very wide continent, and you can have several sub-regions in the continent, but it's always Africa. In Morocco, we feel we are definitely in Africa. Of course, we can be compared to North Africa, but we have also ties with Western Africa, and we have Morocco is compared to a tree with which roots are deeply rooted in Africa, and branches breathing in Europe. So North Africa, of course, Southern Africa, obviously, Eastern, Western, but we talk always about Africa and never of MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know whether I have responded to your question, but I wanted to share this point of view.
That's great. Thank you so much, Saeed. Next question we have is about the legal framework in place at the Casablanca Finance City. Just asking whether it's like the Ad-dār International Finance Center because we're governed by English law, or how the legal system works in CFC. I don't know, is that one for you, Manal, or for Saeed?
I will take this one as well. In CFC, we have put in place a dedicated regulatory framework. But when it comes to laws, we are Moroccan law is the one which is enforced. However, we have put in place an international arbitration and mediation center led by international judges. We have a lot of very well-known the international scene arbitrators. Our arbitration court is led by Laurent Lévy from Geneva, who is one of the most known arbitrators in the world. We have as well some English judges, such as Michael Black, who is a member of our arbitration center. We have Jacob Grierson, who is another member. We have at the same level some other international arbitrators, such as Ina Popova from New York, or Tariq Mossadegh from UAE, Nikos Pitkovic from Vienna, and many others. So the arbitration center is an international one, but when it comes to the civil court, Moroccan law applies.
Thank you very much indeed. Got a question to follow on to that about what is the unlocked potential in Morocco, and which are the specific sectors that you see as part of that potential which is waiting to be unlocked. And following on to ask about what forecasts you make of the current crisis and pandemic in terms of its impact on your mission and activity.
Well, when we talk about unlocked potential, we think obviously of the whole continent. Morocco is one of the leading countries in Africa. But all in all, our African countries are developing small economies. The whole GDP of Africa is roughly 2,500 billion US dollars, which is the turnover that a big multinational realizes either in Europe or in Asia or in the Americas. So globally, we have small economies, but what is the most important is the fact that the potential, the prospects of growth are really there. And we think that by 2050, the global GDP of Africa should reach 29,000 billion US dollars, which is huge, and which is compared to the figures of today, the addition of US GDP and China's GDP. So this to show that the potential is very big, and if today the African economies are too small and the power purchase in Africa is still quite weak. There is a room for international companies to invest, to take the advantage of the first movers, to be there when the growth, when the GDP will reach the developed countries level. Back to your question.
That's super. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's good. We've got sort of two further linked questions, and we'll try and get through these quite quickly as we've got a number still unanswered. So two linked questions. First of all, asking about the safeguard to investments, suggesting that investors will only go to countries that provide safeguards to their investment, and what steps are being taken to give protection on repatriation of investment funds. And then secondly, just could you give an overview about the governance of companies in Morocco, what the broad sweep is in terms of governance arrangements for companies?
Sorry, Professor, I didn't get really well the question. You had two questions, in fact. But
okay. Well, let's see what the first one is. The question of companies wanting to be sure that they can withdraw funds from Morocco after they've invested.
Okay. Well, it's quite simple in Morocco. When you are a foreign investor, whether you are within CFC or outside CFC, you have you are allowed to repatriate all your capital gains and your dividends every year. The main difference between the CFC companies and the other companies within Morocco is that when you are a CFC company, you don't have any administrative procedure. You can do it very easily. It will take you less than 48 hours to send your money wherever you want. When you are not a CFC company, it may take a week or 2 weeks. But the general framework in Morocco allows the repatriation of all the capital gains that I mentioned and the dividends you can have from your activity within Morocco and Africa.
That's great. Thank you very much. Going on to the question for on a particular sector, asking about what the potential is for wealth management and family offices to operate in Morocco as part of the investment community.
Well, wealth management is a real opportunity. And once again, I won't say it's a real opportunity in Morocco, but it's a real opportunity in the whole continent. As I mentioned, we have to think, as of today, of the African continent as a whole, because of the figures that are quite shy today. When you think of high net worth individuals in Africa, you can see that many of them are not really welcome in Western banks, let's say. It's quite difficult to get a visa, even if you are a high net worth individual. It's not easy to have a bank account. There are so many hurdles for African people when they want to go to Europe, that there is really room to develop a wealth management industry within Africa and, of course, in Casablanca, with respect of all the ethic and the prerequisites and the requirements of transparency that are asked for in the global finance worldwide. So the answer is definitely yes. There's a real opportunity because people are getting more and more wealthier, and because they have more and more hurdles to go to see their traditional banks in Western Europe.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one last question, and there are other questions that have come in. And what I'll do, I'll pass that over to Saeed and to Manal after the webinar and ask them to come back to you in writing. We've just had more questions we're going to have time for, so we'll take one more. And it's the question about if people are thinking of moving production away from China, is there an opportunity here for Africa to take some of that profit from business moving away from Chinese production to other parts of the world?
I guess there's a real opportunity for countries that are close to Europe. This pandemic has shown that the ways we were producing in the recent past were not adapted to crises such as the COVID-1. We need new logistic chains. We need to have small delays for producing and delivering goods to the final consumer. And when you are close to Europe, let's talk about Morocco. You can send your production within, let's say, 24 hours by road, crossing the channel by boat, of course, to everywhere in Western Europe. When you need something from China, it will take for you at least 3 weeks. At least 3 weeks. So the difference is obvious. So we have this strategic advantage to be close to Europe. We need to work on our competitiveness. We have to produce at a reasonable price, not the same as China's one, but not too much higher. And we have shown in Morocco that we were able to do so during the pandemic. Just for example, the industry of masks. We are today exporting them to several countries in Europe. When at the beginning of the pandemic, all eyes were oriented towards China. So there is a real improvement, and we have shown that we were absolutely capable of producing very fast and delivering very fast.
Thank you very much. So we're coming to the end of the session today. As I say, the questions we haven't managed to get to, I will pass on to Saeed and Manal and ask them to respond in correspondence. But thank you so much for all of the questions and for your interest. Would really like to invite everyone to get involved in the work we're doing to measure financial centres and commercial centres across the world. Please do get in touch if you are interested in the work that we do. And of course, do take the survey, the Global Financial Centres Index, and indeed that for the Global Green Finance Index, to give an opinion about the financial centres that you know and their current competitiveness. It just remains for me then to thank our distinguished panel today, Saeed Ibrahimi, Manal Banusi, Professor Michael Manelli, and you can have a virtual round of applause. You can't obviously have one from the audience remotely, but I hope that my applause makes up for that. And I'd just like to quote from one comment that someone's made in the question box, which has asked me to pass on my thanks to our guest speakers. The talk was very interesting. The answers to the questions were thoughtful and considered. Thanks very much. So that's from one of our participants today. So we're going to stop there. Thank you very much for your attendance. We look forward to seeing you again at one of our events, or indeed, I'm sure our colleagues will look forward to seeing you in Casablanca at the time that, with travel restrictions, make that possible. We're all able to freely. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.